Computer. Hey everyone, welcome to Menopause Chats. I'm Erin Daruska. I always say this, I'm so excited, but I am every time. I'm excited to be talking to somebody. I'm talking to my friend Nancy today, who honestly we haven't talked in a really long time, so we got to catch up a little bit before we recorded. So
I'm
I'm
so happy about that.
so happy to have you here. Tell us a little bit about your menopause story.
Well, I would have to say I might be one of the few people that didn't have such a hard time pre-menopause well, I'll tell you what I did have a hard time with, actually. I had terrible, terrible periods because I had endometriosis. And so what started happening the couple of years before I actually went through the menopause was I had terribly heavy periods. And so, what I can remember about menopause is my very last period. I remember being at a conference and it felt like Niagara Falls in my body. And it was just the most uncomfortable, horrible thing. And and I was getting these heavy periods like every 20 days. And it was just like all the time. And I was exhausted from that. So I remember I was on the East Coast. I was at this conference. It just was like coming out of my body and I was super vigilant. Is that the word? Anyway, and then it ended, and then I never got my period again. So I didn't have those days of like, oh, I got a little period. Oh, I'm not in menopause anymore. No, it stopped. I had Niagara Falls. It stopped. And I was 50 when that happened. So I thought it was young. My doctor said I was average. That's exactly the average age that women go through menopause. Um, and the thing for me, I felt such relief that I wasn't having those horrible periods anymore. So there was a sense of gratitude for menopause.
Yeah.
And the symptoms I had were not horribly severe, actually. So I had night sweats. I can remember on one hand, like two times when I had something happen in a meeting. Like I've had friends that describe the hot flash in a meeting that they get embarrassed by. As another woman, I never embarrassed for them, but I never had that much, which I'm really grateful for. But I did have the night sweats. Um, but then over the years, the lack of estrogen in my body, because I didn't have my period anymore, I had gone into menopause, that started to affect brain fog and just skin dryness and all that. So I had one doctor, a naturopath, put me on a estrogen progesterone cream. And I did that for a couple of years. And then last year I started to see a different naturopath, and she said that my estrogen levels were still too low. So she put me on the estradiol patch, which I think many would, that's a common thing, along with progesterone. And then I also started giving myself testosterone injections once a week. And then
That
as I
experience.
was sharing,
I
what's
can't.
that?
So, what was that experience like? I can't imagine injecting myself necessarily.
It was fine actually, other than the part that was complicated for me was just trying to get it in the syringe, which sounds dumb, but anyway. Um, so I was talking to her because I'm going on vacation and I wasn't sure about carrying around needles with me on an airplane. And so there's another treatment for hormone replacement that is using pellets that are injected in your buttocks. And so I just did that last week. So estrogen and testosterone, and then I take a progesterone tablet at night. And so I really am feeling more like a human being with those supplements. And I think for a long time, because my mother had breast cancer, they were concerned about that, but that actually isn't a true thing. That was a alarmist response to estrogen.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
and I think it was also oral estrogen that they were studying at the time, which is different.
yeah.
At least what has been shared with me. And again, I'm not a doctor, not medical advice. So if
Mm,
please talk to your own
mm,
doctor. But my understanding was that like because if you're doing something transdermal or probably, I mean, when like
mm.
having something inserted in your buttocks is transdermal, then
Yeah.
you're it bypasses the liver, and some of it
Mhm.
has to do with it being metabolized in the liver.
Oh, that makes sense, actually. That makes sense. The good thing about the pellets, which when she first sold that to me, I was like, oh, no way, I'm doing that. But you don't have to think about it for 3 months. So that part appealed to me.
Yeah.
So, and going through the procedure was nothing at all. So
Is it just
I'm,
like the size of a little piece of rice or like,
you know what? I didn't look at it. Um, I didn't, but I think it's more than one. I think it's based on your dosage because she was saying that apparently she does it with men too that need testosterone replacement, which would make sense, maybe. And she said, because she was talking about precautions to take, and she said, "Oh, I'm not worried about with you, but with men, because I put so many in there, sometimes we have to worry about them popping out." So I know that sounds
yeah,
I don't want to say that to scare anybody off
right.
from doing it. The other thing, just right now, one of the things I'm concerned with is bone density, and taking hormone replacement helps with bone density.
Yeah,
So
for sure. I did get a DEXA
yeah.
scan, so just to figure out like where,
Hmm.
what is our baseline? Because if you don't know, you don't
Hmm.
know, right?
That's
So
right.
I had my baseline. I'm fine, which is good because they're like, "Do you need to be on calcium?" I don't know, like, but let's
Hmm.
let's have it take a look at it. And it's funny. I fell the other day walking up the stairs. I have a pair of linen like pajama pants that I wear, and they're a little
Hmm.
long, and I like stepped on them and just boom, like smashed my
Oh.
head into the stairs. And I was telling like my husband's like, "Do you need to be on calcium?" Because he's like, "You're gonna break a bone," and I'm like, "Oh no!" I was like, "No, my bones are fine." But
Yeah.
I am clumsy, so he's probably not wrong in that.
But that's the thing about the hormone replacement. If anything, getting the word out that that misconception about that for women is, I think, something that's important.
No, there certainly are, and because we've had guests on before who have hormone positive breast cancer, so then
Hmm.
they can't be on it.
Right,
Um,
exactly,
so yeah,
exactly.
but if it is an option. I had the same misconception going in, because
Hmm.
I was in college, I think, when that study came out, and I studied women's studies, and so you
Hmm.
talk about these sorts of things. And I remember thinking like, oh yeah, I wouldn't want my mother, because at the time my mother would have been of that age, and I thought, oh, I don't want my mom going on it. I don't think
Hmm.
anyway, but when I talked to her about her experience, hi mom, I know you watch, but she doesn't recall having, similar to you, like not having really that
Hmm.
experience of it being
Hmm.
big thing. And similarly, mine was fairly mild too, except for some other weird things that I realize now in hindsight were, but and now it's like you can be, and that's the thing people I think don't realize too, is that like you can be on the hormones for a long time. You
Hmm. Yeah.
and estrogen does impact so much. So much. So
Hmm.
you
Yeah, and even the testosterone, I'm pleasantly surprised by, because I lift weights for bone strength, so I'm pleasantly surprised that now I feel like I'm adding on more weight to that, and so yeah.
watch
The-
out.
I know.
It's because I'm on a compounded cream, and like I have to always give my license when I go to pick it up,
Mhm.
whatever. And it's like so funny. It's like I don't think this is gonna really do much, or like I'm not
Yeah.
really gonna be bulking up here. But yeah, I feel you bring up another good point, which is like doing weight bearing exercises and lifting,
Hmm.
and it's so important. I think a
Yeah.
lot of times in general, maybe women are reluctant to do that no matter their age. But as we get older, how much more important
Hmm.
it is bone
Hmm.
just to keep muscle mass. You lose muscle mass as you age, keeping that up. And I look at it as like I do these things now, not because I want to look a certain way, but
Hmm.
so that I'm what I consider functionally fit, right? Like that I can,
Right.
can still, well, I still have a problem opening jars. Like, so I can, bring groceries into the house, that
Hmm.
can walk up the stairs without discomfort.
Hmm.
I, the space that I'm in up now is upstairs, but as I got older, if I didn't have to come up here, this is sort of like a bonus room, right? Uh,
Hmm.
if that happened, but I don't want that to happen. I want to be able to still
Right.
use the
Right.
entire house to be, but when we bought the house, like that was definitely a consideration. Like we should buy on one level. Like
Hmm.
getting any
Well,
younger.
it's interesting. We have two stories in our house too, and I've always like when we first built this house and was talking to my sister, I said I'm never going to build a house that only has one story because I don't plan to be that person when they get old. And then last year I tore my knee meniscus, and going up the stairs, I'm thinking, okay, so that was dumb. So
Because your other
anyway.
place also was on two levels, yeah, or three actually.
Hmm. Yeah, 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 exactly.
We lived
And the other thing I've done is I've just for the bone density, I've gotten one of those rebounders, those little mini trampolines, because
on.
they're good for your bones. And I've gotten a weighted vest that I wear. I haven't started on walks yet because I'm still building back up because of the torn
Mhm.
meniscus. But Yeah, that's next.
All really good things to just keep in mind of like, yeah, I'm trying
Hmm.
to do like, I feel like it's important to move, right? So it's like
Hmm.
whatever I've got,
Absolutely.
for some reason lately, I've gotten really into dancing. So that's the thing I was telling you before this. I'm taking
Hmm.
classes, which, I really just like the sound. Um, and do Zumba and like just moving my
Hmm.
body every day and making sure that, which both of those things are good for like a balance as well, because a lot of
Hmm. Hmm.
you are shifting your weight and
Yeah.
making
Yeah.
sure lifting and doing cardio. And so just and it's to me it's about getting the movement in, and
Yeah.
not being like, oh, I have to like make this, I got to get faster, I got to get stronger, it's like, no, I want to
Hmm.
enjoy. I think that's always the thing that happens, right? People are like, oh, I don't enjoy this thing, so I don't do it anymore. So find the
Yeah.
thing
It's
you
about
do.
having fun. Hmm.
So it's like, if you enjoy Pilates, do Pilates. If you enjoy running, run. If you don't enjoy running,
Hmm.
don't run.
Yeah.
Walk, get bounce on a trampoline or
Yeah. 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 So that's my latest fun thing. And it's amazing that I get winded after doing,
yep.
whatever, how many minutes. But yeah. Anyway, it's keeping moving. And that's the point that you just said.
Well, because if you don't move, it's either move it or lose it, right? Or it's, well, it's
Hmm.
use it or lose it, but I'm going to say move it or
Hmm.
lose it. Um,
Hmm.
because
It
if
works.
you won't, like, I want to be able to continue to do this sort of stuff, maybe not at the same intensity or the same like endurance, like a length of time,
Hmm.
still be able to do these sorts of things as I get older, and I just,
Yeah.
it's the one thing I wish I knew when I was younger, is that like how what you do when you're younger impacts how you are now, right? Um,
Hmm.
I mean, I've always been, as an adult, not necessarily as a child, but like I, off and on running and and active off and on. But I wish I would have maybe paid a little more attention to that,
Hmm.
and more from a functionality perspective. But I think when you're
Yeah.
young, hard to see like, oh,
Hmm.
like I'm gonna be I want to do this when I'm old. And then you think old is like, and then you get there and you're like, oh, it's old, this isn't old.
I know. What was I
Oh,
thinking? No, I know. I do remember though, my mom had some significant health challenges her last 20 years. And I remember talking to her about that. And, what could she had three daughters. I said, what can we girls do? And she said, keep active and keep your weight in check. And those were her two pieces of advice. And so um, I think it's pretty wise. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, as someone whose weight's fluctuated pretty much their entire
Hmm.
life, I'm trying. That's the other thing too. It's like, oh, I'm just trying to
Hmm.
be more mindful of that,
Yeah. Yeah.
particularly in a more southern area. Like I probably eat better
Hmm.
than most people, but I
Hmm.
still, I have my things I like. But that's the thing too. Everything in moderation. Like I'm not.
Hmm.
Sorry, I'm not giving up ice cream. Just not. Do I eat it every day? Absolutely not. But
Hmm.
am I going to have it maybe once a week? Sure.
Yep. Yep. That's very healthy, actually. So.
So I was actually today on my Peloton strength workout. The lady was talking about going to Italy, and she's like, anyone want to guess how many times I had gelato? And I was like, every day. And she was like, every day. I was like, "You're- when you're in Italy, that's what you do."
Exactly. Exactly. Oh my gosh, that's healthy, I think.
Yeah.
That just mindset for your body and for your mind, you
Right.
know.
Yeah, and for me, like it's also this balance of rethinking, like, okay, so I go on, I actually we're heading away for, like we go away for a weekend or something. It's like, okay,
Hmm.
well, maybe a couple weeks leading into that, I'll really, really watch what I eat so that when I go away
Hmm.
for the weekend, I'm not depriving myself.
Hmm.
And then when I come back, I'm just right back to it,
Yep.
So
Yep. Yep.
for me, that's the balance that I've been learning to strike, which is new for me. So it's like, okay, when I'm
Hmm.
traveling, I'll do what I want and then back on it. Or beforehand,
Hmm.
make sure that,
Hmm.
again, losing weight necessarily, but like really watch and then like, okay,
Hmm.
a little
Hmm.
balance.
Yep. Or ramping up the exercise a little bit before or after, yeah.
Or make sure even when you're traveling to still move, I mean, that's
Hmm.
oftentimes if we're going to like a place we haven't been to, it's like we walk a lot anyway. So it's
Hmm.
like, well, that's
Hmm.
one of my favorite ways to explore a new area is like, oh, I
Yes.
feet and I want to walk around and
Yeah.
I want to see stuff, and so that can be really helpful too. But that's the thing too, like thinking of places like we were in Savannah, and there's a lot of cobblestone in Savannah, so that takes balance, right? And so you
Hmm.
be careful of like in watch, and so as I, I'm sure we'll continue to travel. And so just making sure that, I can still do that and
Hmm.
be confident on my feet. Again, I
Yeah.
keep
Yeah.
learning. So that's always been a thing. It's not related to my age. But yeah, is there anything that like, how are your healthcare providers? It sounds like you found some good doctors that were able to kind of help guide you.
Yeah, I've always been a proponent of having a good naturopath, and I live in Oregon, so that it's common here to have naturopaths along with your doctors. And so for the first time when we moved into this house, I had a primary care physician and a naturopath, and then I decided I didn't actually need to have both of that. So I found a new naturopath, and she specializes in women's health. So she's the one that looked at my blood work and said, I think you could benefit from upping your estrogen a bit. And so I appreciate the focus that she has provided around that. So um, yeah, so I feel like um, I don't know if I had the best doctors before I went through menopause, but I don't know that I was looking for them actually either. So, um, yeah, it's yeah. So but I do feel completely supported by the doctor I have right now, for
Mhm.
sure.
Good, good.
So,
I as I said, my first doctor, I was like, and before that, I really wasn't.
hmm,
And I had a great doctor, when I was in California, I had a great doctor, but it just never came up. And I
hmm,
do know that it can start as early as 35. I don't know when it really started for me, but I felt like I had good doctors, but in hindsight, I was like, oh, I was having all these things treated that probably were related to perimenopause,
hmm,
but weren't
hmm,
being seen as that.
right.
Can't go back and change that, but now just knowing, and I talked with another guest on about like, oh, if you test your hormones, they're like, well, they fluctuate. But I think once you're
Hmm,
post-menopausal, they don't really fluctuate. So, like your doctor,
hmm,
oh, that's still low. Like same thing with mine. Like mine was so low that she was like, yeah, you're definitely post-menopausal.
hmm,
Probably wouldn't be that low if it was,
right,
and I
right.
think really fascinating is like talking to my cousins who I'm the youngest in that family. And I don't know if I shared the story on here or not. So apologies if someone's listening, be like, you said that 3 episodes ago. Um, but it was we all had this, like we're, I'm the youngest and they're, within a few couple years of me, but still, and I had the lowest estrogen. And so it was really funny, but
I
it's
never thought to compare that with my cousins or
yeah,
sisters.
we were just chatting about it, and someone's like, "Oh, I just had mine tested." And so it was just one of those sorts of
Hmm,
that came up, and it was like, "Oh, I just had mine," and like because everybody's medical records are on their like
hmm,
phones pretty much at this point. We were looking, and I was like, "Oh," yeah, and it turned out, yeah, mine was the lowest, and I'm the youngest, and they're like, "How is that?" I'm like,
hmm,
I think it's just sort of luck, the draw, genetics, who knows, so
hmm.
it just is what
Yeah.
it is, but for me that was like, okay, this is what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna, you know after I, had a conversation with my doctor about, I was like, I'll try it. And if it didn't, for me, it was like, I'm going to try the transdermal patch. And if it didn't work, and that's the thing too, is like, then have dialogue with the doctor then,
Hmm,
well, this isn't
hmm,
working, or it used to work and now I'm starting to feel a certain way, or, it's like, how are your symptoms? Are they different? Are they better? Are they
hmm,
worse? And I think we talked about like the cream that I had, I
hmm,
estradiol cream to start and it didn't really do anything. And so now I'm on a compounded estradiol testosterone cream, which does work.
hmm,
But it's again, you don't know these things until you start to
hmm.
through it and try it out and go, okay.
That's right. And I also think that in this time frame right now, doctors are not so reluctant to prescribe hormone replacement. So it is a more common conversation that doctors will have with
Yeah.
their patients.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I do think, although this didn't happen for me, but it's some of my friends that the doctor's able to tell from the blood work where somebody is in their perimenopause.
Yeah.
And I think it must have to do with the estrogen levels, actually. I hadn't thought about what they're actually looking at, but it must have to do with that.
Yeah, I know it's there.
So,
There's like the is it like follicle stimulating hormone is like another indicator.
hmm, 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 yeah.
ASH. Can't use my
Yeah,
English.
because that's about your the ovaries going through ovulation too. So yeah, you're right
There
that'd
were
be
a
part
couple
of it.
things. I can't remember what the other ones were. Like those two, I definitely remember seeing, and and I think they look at those sort of like, and then that
Hmm,
tell a bigger picture, right?
hmm. Mhm.
So, and I had this whole thing too, where like my cholesterol is like borderline. And then so it's like, do
Mhm.
you statin? Do you not go on a statin? I don't know.
Mhm.
But then like the statins don't work the same way in women as they work in men. They're really
Mhm.
great for men,
Mhm.
apparently, but for women, it's like it doesn't really, it was interesting. It was described to me as like it won't prevent the first heart attack, it will prevent a second because women have different like so the way it was explained to me was like there's like these issues like micro issues and macro issues and
Mhm.
tend to have them on the macro or the
Mhm.
level, not the macro level. And so I was
Mhm.
okay, so it's like that. And then there's that whole conversation of like, do I do that? Do I not
Mhm.
do that? I chose not to because I'm like, all right, well, my risk was pretty low, like anyway, of having an event in the next 10 years, which is really what it's supposed to do.
Mhm.
Well, it just seems like I'm taking something that may not help anything. So,
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah.
um, but again, your estrogen impacts like can
Mhm.
impact cholesterol and other things too. So it's like, oh, it's like, okay,
Mhm.
is it like, will it start to like be like, should I have it I mean, I will get it checked every year, but like, should I, is it going to be different in a year? Because maybe it's already worked its way, worked
Mhm.
itself through, but maybe it was
Mhm.
high because my estrogen was low. I don't know. So
Oh, that's interesting. I didn't know the correlation between cholesterol and estrogen.
I
Um,
feel like there's one again,
yeah.
not the doctor. So
Yeah.
maybe I'm just telling myself this. I don't know.
Well, just know the symptoms are different for women with for a
Yeah.
heart event as
Yeah.
well. So
Yeah.
just
And for a lot of
understand that.
yeah, for a lot.
Hmm.
I mean, that was my mom's case. She had a heart attack, didn't realize it, So, she's fine now. As I said, she watches this, so and I wasn't talking about like she's watching from above. Um, but, like, yeah, she's okay. But like, yeah, it's an interesting,
Mhm.
you never know. And so that was my thing too. It's like, well, there's a family
Mhm.
history here. So like, but they're also like, well, was it before
Mhm.
they were 50? And it was like, no. And they're like, okay.
Mhm.
So it seems like as long if stuff happens, the older you are, the doctors
Uh-huh.
are again.
Yeah.
Like, okay,
Yeah. It's like my mom's breast cancer. She had it in her 60s, and it's like, oh, okay, because then that impacts what how they think about me and the estrogen thing
it's
too.
true.
So
It's true.
yeah.
And I didn't realize that either. It's like that there's like a correlation. So I just thought
Hmm.
family history is family history. Um,
Hmm.
it depends on the age and all that. So
Whether it's postmenopausal, so
yeah,
what it is.
yeah,
So yeah.
yeah. True. And that was the other thing
Yeah.
too, we were talking about that study, because I think that study was where that sort of pushed people out for years was
Hmm.
done with a pill, not a transdermal.
Hmm.
And it was, I think the age group of the people, a lot of them were postmenopausal too. So it was like it was not a perfect study,
Yeah.
which is
Yeah.
why.
It was, and my understanding was very limited as well. So
Right. And then they shut it down. So then you couldn't,
mm-hmm.
as soon as they saw it, which, hey, I get that, I understand that as well. But, it's it definitely informed a generation.
Mm-hmm.
So
That's great putting it. It formed a generation.
yeah. And still is to some extent what we're trying to change.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Aaron will do it one video at a time.
Yes, exactly. Anything else you'd like to share or that I haven't asked or
I think if anybody is fearing this or concerned about it, their menopause for me is a blessing. It's especially when you can do things like hormone replacement. But it's not something to be afraid of at all. It's almost a liberating thing, actually, to be honest.
yeah, I agree. I agree. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate you being on.
Yeah, it was fun to be here with you, Erin.
And so thank you for joining us today. If you'd like to be on, please reach out. Otherwise, please share with others. I would just want to get the word out to other folks. So feel free to subscribe, to like, to share, to repost. Happy to have you do that. Otherwise, you'll see me on a future episode. I've been releasing these on Mondays. I'm calling it Meno Monday. I'm singing it in my head like Manic Monday by the Bangles. Probably can't. I was like, oh, could I make something like that? I don't want to get sued. So, so sing it to yourself on Mondays when I launch a new episode. But I hope everyone has a wonderful day.